What happens when a prince trades his crown for a beggar's rags to find true love and truth among the forgotten? In a kingdom divided by gold and grit, one bold choice will shake the throne to its core. This is the story of Prince Akin, who pretends to be poor to find true love. Nestled between quiet hills and green forests, the kingdom of Aluginal stood proud and beautiful. The people believed the gods had blessed their land. The rivers sparkled under the golden sun, and the wind carried the sweet smells of mango trees, fresh earth, and old stories. To visitors, Aluginal looked like paradise, filled with beauty, peace, and pride. But behind the shining palace walls, life was not as perfect as it seemed. At the top of Alumo Heights stood the royal palace. Built from stone and decorated with the symbols of their ancestors, the palace watched over the whole kingdom. This was where the king ruled, where laws were made, and where the future of Aluginal was shaped. Inside the palace, nobles lived in luxury. They wore fine clothes, ate the best food, and drank from cups made of ivory. They were treated with great respect and believed they were chosen by the gods. But outside the palace gates, down the hill, was a different Aluginal. In the village, life was simple and hard. The common people, farmers, potters, weavers, and water carriers, woke early every day to work and survive. Their hands built and fed the kingdom, yet they were often ignored by those in power. Even though they worked the hardest, they lived with the least. There was an invisible wall between the rich and the poor. The nobles thought they were better than the commoners. They kept their family names pure and refused to mix with the lower class. They taught their children not to see poor people as equals. Some even believed poor people were only meant to serve. Meanwhile, the commoners often said the nobles didn't understand real struggle. They had never felt hunger or watched someone die because they couldn't afford medicine. Still, most villagers accepted their place in life, thinking the gods had written their fate long ago. Even though there was peace, there was tension too. Everyone smiled during festivals, and people prayed in both the palace and the village shrines. But deep inside, people knew that true unity was just a dream. This is where our story begins. The palace was busy with preparations. King Adewale, though growing old and weak, still ruled with wisdom and strength. His queen, Ife, stood beside him, smart and full of spirit. She protected the traditions of Aluginal with all her heart. But now all eyes were on their only son, Prince Akin. Akin was everything a prince should be: handsome, smart, and trained in both war and peace. But he felt something was missing. While other young nobles enjoyed the wealth and chased after noble daughters, Akin often stood at the palace balcony, looking out at the village. The dirt roads, the small homes, and the sound of children laughing touched something deep inside him. He had heard stories from the palace guards about the lives of the common people, their hard work, their kindness, their pain. And Akin began to wonder, how could he truly rule these people if he didn't understand their lives? He woke up early each day, not to rest, but to begin a long day of lessons, meetings, and duties. Everyone in the palace watched him closely. He was the only son of the king. He would be the next ruler. He had no time for mistakes. One morning, an announcement was made. The king is looking for a wife for Prince Akin. The future queen of Aluginal must be found. Soon, noble and royal ladies came from all parts of the land. They came in shiny carriages, wearing rich clothes and golden jewelry. They smiled, laughed, and spoke sweet words to Akin. Some danced in the courtyard. Others gave him gifts, perfumes, rare books, and even white horses. But Akin's heart was not moved. Each time he met one of them, he felt more and more unhappy. They were kind, yes. Beautiful, yes. But they all saw only a prince, not the man behind the crown. He sat alone many nights, thinking deeply. One night, as the moon rose, he walked to his favorite balcony. From there, he looked at the small village beyond the palace. Tiny lights glowed from the huts. He heard laughter, children playing, and people singing after a long day of work. That is where real life happens, he said to himself. Not here in this golden prison. King Adewale sat on the lion-carved throne, his eyes calm but tired. The throne room, lit by golden torches and filled with the smell of incense, still echoed with power. Servants moved quietly, and guards stood tall like statues, but all knew the truth. They had seen the way the king now walked slower, how he leaned more often on his staff, how his once thunderous voice now came out in gentle waves. He tried to hide it. He smiled during court meetings. He laughed during public events. But behind closed doors, he sometimes winced when he stood. And there were nights when Queen Ife sat by his side, rubbing his hands gently and whispering prayers under her breath. They had ruled together for many years. Their love was steady, not loud or full of show, but deep like the roots of an old tree. Ife had been his partner in every way, wise in counsel, brave in decision, and fierce in guarding the traditions of Illusional. She believed in order, in rules, in keeping things as they had always been. And though Adewale was more open-hearted, he trusted her instincts. Now, as his body grew weaker, he leaned more on her, not just for strength but for guidance. "We must prepare a kin," he said one evening as they sat in their private chamber. The moonlight spilled through the window, bathing them in silver. Queen Ife turned to him, her brows drawn. "He is not ready," she said quietly. "He dreams too much. He questions too much. That is why he must be ready," the king replied, his voice firm but low. "A king cannot lead a people he does not know. And a kin, he wants to know them. He wants to become one of them," Ife said sharply. "To walk in the streets without guards, to sleep under thatched roofs, to eat food cooked in iron pots. It is not safe. It is not wise. He was born to rule, not roam." Adewale smiled gently. "Perhaps that is what makes him different. And perhaps that is what makes him right for the throne." Queen Ife stood and walked to the open window, looking out toward the far hills where the village lights flickered like stars on the ground. "I worry for him," she whispered. "The world beyond the palace is not kind. He has not known hunger. He has not seen cruelty. He thinks he can carry the kingdom on dreams, but dreams are light things. Ruling is heavy." "I know," the king said. He rose slowly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "But he has our blood, and he has our heart. Let us not break his spirit before he even begins." For a moment they stood in silence. The sounds of the night drifted in, the song of crickets, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant beating of a drum from a nearby shrine. Then Queen Ife turned to him, her eyes fierce again. "He must not marry a commoner." King Adewale said nothing. "I see it in his eyes," she continued. "He is searching not just for truth, but for love out there, among the villagers. But he is a prince. His wife must be noble. She must understand the ways of the palace. The bloodline must remain pure." The king sighed. "And what if love cannot be ordered? What if the gods have written his heart a different path?" Ife did not answer. She simply walked back to her seat and sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "We will speak with him," she said finally. "Together. He must understand his duty, before he falls too far." Adewale nodded slowly, though deep in his heart. He knew the path the kin wanted to walk could not be stopped with words alone. The prince was not like other nobles. There was fire in his questions, and warmth in his gaze whenever he looked beyond the palace gates. He was born of kings, yes, but his soul belonged to the people. And as the king leaned back, his breath slowing, his fingers trembling just slightly, he wondered how much time he had left to teach, to guide, to prepare. The kingdom of Illusional stood at the edge of change, and the throne he had held for decades would soon hold new weight. Whether it would rise or fall, he did not know. But he prayed that when the time came, his son would not just wear the crown, but carry it with wisdom. The next evening, Akin stood before his parents, the king and the queen. They sat in the royal sitting room. The queen wore her green robe, her eyes sharp but kind. The king looked tired. His voice was strong, but his body was weak. "You look troubled, my son," the king said. Akin took a deep breath. "Father, mother, I do not wish to marry any of the women who have come. The queen sat up straight. What? But they are the finest in the land. Strong, smart, and royal. Akin nodded. Yes, they are. But none of them sees me for who I really am. They love the title, not the person. The king frowned. This is how royal life works, Akin. You don't marry for love. You marry for duty. I know, father, Akin said softly. But I want more than duty. I want to find someone who sees me as just a man, not as a prince. The queen was shocked. And where do you think you'll find such a woman? I must leave the palace, Akin said. Just for a while. I'll wear simple clothes and use a false name. I will live among the people. If I find someone who loves me there, truly loves me, then I will know she is the right one. Absolutely not, the queen said. You are the only heir to this throne. It's dangerous. What if something happens to you? You've never lived outside these walls, the king added. You don't know that world. Then I must learn, Akin replied. How can I lead people I do not understand? The queen's eyes filled with tears. Akin, you are our only son. My heart cannot bear the thought of losing you. I will be careful, Akin said. I will take nothing from the palace. I will go alone. And I promise, I will return. The room went quiet. At last, the king spoke. You are no longer a boy. If your heart tells you to go, I will not stop you. But be wise, be alert, and come back to us. The queen looked at her son, then slowly nodded. Go, but take my blessing and my worry with you. That night, Prince Akin packed a small bag. He left behind his fine clothes and rings. He put on an old tunic and sandals. And from that moment, he was no longer Prince Akin. He was just a young man named Tunde, walking into the world to find love, truth, and maybe something more. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills of Illusional, casting a soft golden light across the fields. But for the first time, Prince Akin was not waking to the sounds of palace drums or the gentle knock of royal servants. He was not being offered fresh fruit or helped into fine robes. Instead, he stood by a dusty roadside, his royal identity hidden beneath rough, faded clothes and worn-out sandals. Now he was Tunde. His once smooth hands clutched a small bag containing just a change of clothes, a little money, and a leather water pouch. His heart pounded with both excitement and fear. Kunle, his royal servant and a friend, had dropped him off before sunrise and left quickly, not wanting to draw attention. Remember, Kunle had said, you're just a traveler looking for work. Don't slip up. Akin nodded to himself as he adjusted the brown cap that hid most of his face. He took a deep breath and stepped onto the narrow path that led toward the village square. The square was already alive with people. Traders shouted about their goods. Fish, yams, peppers, fabric, while children ran barefoot through the dust. The air smelled of wood smoke, fried plantain, and sweat. Akin, now Tunde, walked slowly, trying to blend in. But it didn't take long for people to notice him. Hey, see that one? A young man laughed, pointing at Akin's sandals. Even beggars wear better. Another voice chimed in. This one looks confused. Lost his way from the city, maybe. Laughter followed. Akin kept walking, forcing a smile and pretending not to care. But inside, his pride ached. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. No one had ever laughed at him, at least not to his face. He approached a food stall and politely asked the woman behind it, Please, do you have any leftover akara I can buy? She glanced at him, unimpressed. You have money? He reached into his pouch and offered a small coin. She snatched it, dropped 2 small pieces of akara into a leaf, and shoved it toward him. Don't stand around too long. You'll scare away real customers. Akin took the food and walked away. He sat on a low wooden bench beneath a mango tree and looked around. He had imagined this moment many times. He thought he would feel free, powerful even, like he was finally stepping into truth. But now, sitting there with dust on his clothes and the taste of bitterness in his mouth, he felt something else. Alone. Akin spent hours walking around the village, watching people as they worked. He saw women carrying baskets on their heads, some singing to their babies tied to their backs. He saw men hammering metal, weaving mats, and fetching water from a nearby stream. At one point, he asked an older man if he could help carry firewood in exchange for some food. The man looked him over, shook his head, and muttered, "You don't look strong enough. Go and sit somewhere." Every rejection stung. In the palace, people bowed before him. Out here, they barely looked at him. He was nobody, invisible. By the time the sun began to set, his feet ached, his back was sore, and worst of all, his heart felt heavy with doubt. Did I make a mistake? He wondered. He found a quiet spot beneath a small wooden shed near the edge of the village. It wasn't much, just 4 poles and a weak roof, but it was dry and hidden. He sat down, pulled his knees to his chest, and tried to rest. As darkness crept in, he heard the soft sound of laughter from nearby homes. Oil lamps lit up small windows. The smell of dinner filled the air, soups boiling, firewood crackling. Akin's stomach growled. He closed his eyes, whispering to himself, "You chose this path. Endure it." But deep down, a small fear grew in him. What if he wasn't strong enough? What if the life he wanted to understand was more difficult than he ever imagined? And yet, despite the hunger and shame, he also felt something new, something strange. Realness. For the first time in his life, there were no guards, no servants, no titles. Just the stars above and the rough ground beneath him. It was harsh, but it was true. And this, he thought, is where the real journey begins. The rooster's crow cut through the early morning silence. Akin stirred from his spot beneath the shed, his back stiff and sore from sleeping on bare wood. His mouth was dry, and his stomach was still empty from the night before. But something in him had shifted. The pain and humiliation of the first day still lingered. But now, there was also a quiet determination. He reminded himself why he had left the palace. To find someone who loved him. Not the prince, not the title, but the person underneath. He dusted off his clothes, splashed water from a public bowl over his face, and set off. Akin, now Tunde, approached the same akara stall from the day before. This time, he didn't ask for food. He offered, "I can help wash your pots or sweep the area," he said to the woman behind the stall. She raised an eyebrow. "You want to work?" He nodded. She scoffed but handed him a small broom. "Let's see how well you can sweep." Tunde got to work. He swept the ground, cleaned the pots, and even helped carry firewood. By midday, sweat dripped from his forehead, and his hands were blistered. But when he finished, she handed him a small plate of food, twice as much as yesterday. "You're not useless after all," she said with a nod. Tunde gave a small smile. "Thank you, Ma." It was the first act of kindness he had received. Later, Tunde followed the sound of laughter to a public well. Children were fetching water, some splashing each other playfully. He offered to help a woman lift her heavy bucket onto her head. She was surprised but grateful. "Thank you," she said. "Most boys don't offer unless they want something." "I just wanted to help," Tunde replied. A few other villagers noticed. Whispers followed him, not mocking this time, but curious. "Who is that boy? New face, polite, works hard." The mood was beginning to shift. That night, Tunde sat by a small group of boys around a fire. They were roasting corn and telling stories. At first, they ignored him, but one boy passed him a stick of corn without a word. Tunde accepted it with quiet gratitude. They shared laughs over silly tales, most of which were exaggerated nonsense. One boy claimed he'd seen a spirit near the river. Another swore he once caught a fish the size of a goat. Tunde laughed too, letting himself blend in. No one knew he was royalty. No one cared. He was just a boy named Tunde who could work, listen, and laugh. As he lay back beneath the open sky, full for the first time in days, Tunde stared at the stars. He missed the soft bed in his palace chamber, the clean clothes, and the scent of polished floors. But tonight, under the stars and surrounded by strangers who were slowly becoming familiar, he felt something new, peace. He hadn't found love yet, but he was learning something more valuable. How to live, how to survive, how to be someone without a crown. And somewhere deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Tunde sat on a stone near a noisy street corner, resting after sweeping the food stall again. His hands were sore, and his clothes still carried the scent of smoke and fried beans. He looked out at the crowd, trying to find his next move. "Hey!" A voice chirped from behind. Tunde turned. A skinny young man with big eyes and even bigger confidence stood grinning at him. He was about the same age as the prince. His shirt was torn at the neck, and he carried a basket filled with random trinkets. Cheap combs, strings of beads, and plastic whistles. "You look like a prince," the young man said boldly, "but dressed like a beggar." Tunde blinked. "Excuse me? You heard me?" The young man laughed. "You've got a royal neck, long and straight. But that shirt? Even my dog would bark at it." Tunde couldn't help but smile. "I'm Femi," the young man added, stretching his hand. "Official street manager. I know everybody, every corner, every troublemaker." "Tunde," Akin replied, shaking his hand. "I'm from a village far from here. My father used to own a big farm, but we lost everything. So, I came here to find work." Femi nodded slowly. One of those sad stories. Don't worry, you're in the right hands now." Femi led Tunde down a narrow alley that opened into a sun-baked courtyard. The scent of wet clay filled the air. Rows of handcrafted pots, bowls, and jars stood neatly arranged under a wooden shade. Some still drying, others glazed and ready for sale. A giant mango tree stood in the corner, its branches wide, offering a cool shadow where an old man sat chewing on sugarcane. "That's him," Femi whispered, lowering his voice. "Baba Danjuma. Don't talk too much. Just greet him and let your hands do the rest." Tunde adjusted the frayed strap on his shoulder and walked forward. His heart beat faster. This wasn't just about getting a job. This was about surviving, about starting over. "Good afternoon, sir," he said respectfully, bowing slightly. "My name is Tunde. I'm looking for honest work." Baba Danjuma paused mid-chew. His eyes, sharp and yellowed with age, studied the boy from head to toe. He didn't respond immediately. Tunde stood still, feeling the silence stretch. Baba's gaze lingered unusually long, not on the boy's torn shirt or dusty sandals, but on the way he stood, upright, calm. There was something refined in the way Tunde carried himself, even while looking poor. "You're not from here," Baba finally said, voice rough like gravel. "No, sir," Tunde replied. "I'm from a faraway village. My father used to have land, but we lost everything. I came here to start fresh." Still chewing, Baba rose slowly. His back curved slightly with age, but his hands were strong and firm. He walked up to Tunde, close enough to look him in the eye. "You ever handled clay before?" "No, sir, but I can learn. I'm willing." More silence. Femi stood to the side, shifting nervously. Baba reached out and tapped Tunde gently on the chest. "You've got eyes that don't belong on these streets," he said, almost to himself. "But hunger humbles even kings." He turned and walked back under the mango tree. "Sweep the yard. If you do it well, you'll eat tonight." Tunde blinked. That was it. His first task, his first chance. Tunde swept the courtyard thoroughly, moving with focused energy. He cleared leaves, rearranged pots, and even began stacking clay in the workshop with surprising care. Baba watched silently from a distance. Something about the young man intrigued him. It wasn't just that he worked hard. Many boys worked hard when hungry. But Tunde was graceful. When he lifted a pot, he did it as though it were precious. When he arranged things, he paid attention to symmetry. He never dragged his feet, never muttered under his breath. There was dignity in his silence, a kind of discipline not usually found in desperate boys. And then there were his hands. Though now dirted by clay, Baba noticed that his palms weren't rough, not the way a laborer's should be. His fingernails were trimmed. His posture is straight. Yet he didn't complain, didn't fumble. Baba muttered. There's a story behind that boy. Baba sat on a wooden stool, grinding pepper with a stone bowl. He called out without looking up. Tunde. Yes, sir, Tunde said, rushing over. Take that bowl. You'll wash it. Then you can eat. Afterward, you'll sleep in the back shed. Tunde smiled. Thank you, sir. Baba glanced at him briefly. Don't thank me yet. Work starts before the sun rises. We'll see if you're still smiling then. But even as he said it, a faint smile touched the corner of Baba's lips. He had seen many boys come and go, thieves, runaways, or lazy mouths with fast excuses. But this one was different, not just because he worked hard, but because he reminded Baba of something long gone. Nobility, quiet strength, the kind of spirit that could command respect without shouting. He didn't know who Tunde really was, but deep down, Baba Danjuma knew this young man, who claimed to come from a fallen farm, hadn't come to the city just to survive. He had come searching for something, and Baba, old as he was, decided to give him that chance. Tunde followed Femi through the dusty square, carrying pottery orders. They joked and laughed like boys who had been friends for years. Suddenly, the mood changed. A tall young man in fine clothes stepped into their path. Behind him were three others, all smirking. The leader had slick hair and a sharp tongue. Well, 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 he sneered. Our dear Femi, what do you have for us today? Tunde noticed how Femi's face changed. The grin vanished. He lowered his head and reached into his pocket, pulling out a few dirty coins. Is that all? The rich boy asked. Your mouth is big, but your pocket is shrinking. Tunde narrowed his eyes. Who are you? The boy turned to Tunde. New face. I'm just helping with deliveries, Tunde replied calmly. The boy stepped closer, looking him up and down. I'm Jide. My father owns half the market. If you work here, you pay respect. Respect means money. Understand? Tunde stared at him but said nothing. Femi quickly stepped in. He just started, Jide. He doesn't have anything yet. Jide scoffed. Then he better get something, or he'll pay in other ways. They pushed past, laughing cruelly. Tunde sat cross-legged on his mat, deep in thought. Femi paced the room, still upset. I hate them, Femi muttered. They act like kings just because their fathers have money. One day, someone will teach them a lesson. Tunde looked at the ceiling. A drop of water fell and landed on his cheek. They think power is about fear, he said quietly. But real power, it comes from something else. Femi looked confused. Tunde smiled slightly. Don't worry, let's just focus on surviving for now. The flickering lamp dimmed as the oil ran low. The room was cold, but in that moment, a small bond had formed between a talkative hustler and a quiet stranger hiding a crown. And though trouble was sure to follow, so was purpose. One morning, Tunde made his way through the market square, a small wrapped bundle of clay in his arms, an errand from Baba Danjuma to deliver materials to a nearby vendor. The air buzzed with voices and footsteps, but this time, it didn't overwhelm him. He moved with more confidence, head low but eyes alert, taking in the rhythm of the street. He noticed things now. The old women who argued over the price of herbs. The barefoot boys offering to carry crates for a few coins. The clang of metal bowls and the smell of roasted plantain drifting from a corner. And then he saw her. She was sweeping slowly in front of a wooden stall, her faded orange wrapper swaying with each motion. Her movements were steady, almost graceful, focused, like she belonged to a different rhythm than the noisy world around her. He slowed slightly. She looked up, just for a second. Their eyes met. No smile, no words, just a moment. Then she returned to her sweeping, and he continued on his path. He didn't know her name yet, Adesua, but something about her presence lingered in his mind longer than it should have. Not just her face, but the quiet calm that wrapped around her like a second skin. In a market full of strangers, she didn't look at him like one, and somehow that made the street feel a little less cold.